I never thought my virginity would be worth $500,000. Honestly, I never thought it was worth anything at all. My name is Sophie Hayes. I'm 21 years old. And the only thing I inherited from my parents was the responsibility of raising my little sister after they died in a car accident 3 years ago. Since then, my life has been a tightrope walk of overdue bills, cheap meds from discount pharmacies, and desperate attempts to keep Ellie, my 8-year-old sister, out of the foster system. Everything I do is for her. I work 2 jobs. I walk dogs, clean yards, deliver food. And still, the diagnosis came without mercy. Ellie needs emergency heart surgery. A hidden condition, silent and invisible, that could kill her if untreated. The cost? Over $100,000. That's when a co-worker at the night shift restaurant mentioned Serena Clinic, a discreet he-and agency that arranges surrogacy agreements between young, healthy women and ultra-wealthy couples. At first, I thought it was some kind of scam or trafficking. But it's all legal, contracts, lawyers, medical oversight. And one very specific clause. They wanted a virgin. A virgin. I don't know what they think that guarantees. Maybe some obsession with control or purity. But it didn't matter. The offer came with a number that made my stomach twist. $500,000 for 9 months of pregnancy, plus full medical expenses and a new apartment for 1 year. It was enough to save Ellie's life. Pay for her surgery, get her into a good school. Maybe I could even go back to art school one day. A dream I abandoned the day I signed guardianship papers for my sister. The agency assistant looked at me like I was made of glass. I wore ripped jeans, worn-out sneakers, and a 3-year-old t-shirt. She, on the other hand, looked like she stepped out of a fashion catalog, but she was kind, almost gentle. Sophie, the Lancasters are delective, very private. Everything will be under strict confidentiality. Mrs. Lancaster wants full control. And Mr. Lancaster, well, he wants to know everything about you. Family history, habits, even your dating past. This will be an interview process, and if I'm accepted, you'll meet them in person. They insist. When I left the clinic, the New York sky was covered in thick, gray clouds. I looked at my cracked phone screen and saw a message from Ellie's school. She's having chest pains. Please come immediately. I ran, without thinking, without breathing. On that walk, I made my choice. I said yes to the interview. The Lancasters' home wasn't a home. It was a fortress, all glass and steel, overlooking Central Park, with floor-to-ceiling windows and guards in suits more expensive than my entire wardrobe. A black car picked me up. The clinic gave me a simple dress and flats. A stylist did my hair. I barely recognized myself in the mirror, but my heart pounded like a war drum. A stunning woman greeted me at the door, tall, elegant, with a flawless bun and skin like porcelain. She was coldly beautiful, like a sculpture in a museum. Hello, Sophie. I'm Isabel Lancaster. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. Her voice was soft, but her eyes were sharp, polite, controlled. Nice to meet you too, Mrs. Lancaster. Please sit. My husband will join us shortly. He insists on meeting all candidates himself. She led me to a living room that looked more like a modern art gallery. Everything was white, silent, and sterile. Even the paintings seemed to judge me. May I ask? I hesitated. Why exactly does the surrogate have to be a virgin? She finished, her tone unchanged. I nodded, embarrassed. It's not religious, if that's what you're thinking. It's clinical. There are studies suggesting higher success rates in first-time implantation with an untouched uterus. She said it so plainly, but her eyes never blinked. I had the feeling there was more to it than that.
He walked in, Damien Lancaster, and for a second, I forgot how to breathe. Tall, sharp suit.
Chiseled jaw, dark hair, perfectly styled. Eyes like frozen steel. He didn't just enter the room, he commanded it. He looked at me like he was reading a file only he had access to. So this is Sophie Hayes. His voice was deep, controlled. Measured, yes, Isabel replied. The most qualified candidate we've seen. He stepped closer, just 2 steps between us. And without touching me, my skin went electric. My fingers tingled. My pulse skipped. He extended his hand. Welcome to our home, Sophie. When his skin touched mine, something in me trembled. I should have felt nervous, or at least cautious, but what I felt was heat. And for the first time since I lost everything, I felt like something important was about to happen. Something big. Something dangerous. I don't know what I expected when I shook Damien Lancaster's hand, but I didn't expect my legs to go weak. He wasn't just handsome. He was deliberate, controlled. Everything about him felt like it had been carefully designed, his tone, his posture, even the slight pause between his words. As if he didn't waste breath on things that didn't matter. And still he was watching. Me like I mattered. I cleared my throat and tried to smile. Thank you for having me. Of course, he replied. Please sit. His voice was calm, but I felt like I'd been handed a final exam with no chance to study. I sat across from them, my palms slick with nervous sweat, my back straight as a board. Isabel folded her legs with practiced elegance and leaned slightly forward, like this was a boardroom presentation and I was the candidate for CEO of her uterus. Damien remained quiet for a moment, just observing. Then he asked, "Why did you agree to this?" Straight to the point. No small talk. I swallowed hard. I wasn't going to lie, but the truth wasn't easy either. My sister, she's 8. Her name's Ellie. She has a heart condition that needs urgent surgery. I don't have insurance. I don't have family. This is the only way I can pay for it in time. Silence. Isabel blinked once, slowly. Damien's expression didn't change, but something about the way he adjusted in his seat made me feel like he respected that, even if he didn't say it. And you're sure you understand what this commitment involves? Isabel asked, her voice smooth like silk over ice. The contract requires full-time residency. You won't be allowed to leave the property without written approval. You'll follow a strict wellness program, diet, exercise, medical check-ins. We also ask that you remain abstinent and avoid all stimulants and medications not pre-approved. I nodded, trying to hide how fast my heart was racing. Yes, I understand. I read everything. And the clause about ... intimacy? She added, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly. I stiffened. I've never been with anyone. I admitted quietly. Another pause. Damien looked directly at me. His eyes didn't waver. For a moment, I thought I saw something flicker in them, sympathy. Curiosity? I couldn't tell. We've gone through 6 candidates, he said finally. Some withdrew after reading the lifestyle restrictions. Others failed the psychological screening. The truth is, we don't just want someone healthy. We want someone who can handle pressure. Someone who can follow rules, even when they're uncomfortable. I felt the weight of his words like a challenge. My instinct? Stand and walk away, but I stayed seated. I met his gaze. I've been handling pressure since I was 17, I said softly. Rules don't scare me. That seemed to surprise him. Just a little. Isabel gave a tight smile. There's one more thing. We'd like you to move in ... immediately. We'll begin preparing for the IVF cycle within days. Immediately? I echoed. I thought I'd have a week. A few days at least to prepare Ellie, pack my things. Breathe. You'll be allowed monitored communication with your sister, Isabel continued. We'll arrange for her care while you're here. Everything will be provided. But this arrangement is ... sensitive. We can't risk attention. No social media. No outside contact beyond what's approved. It felt like a prison wrapped in diamonds. I looked at the two of them. Isabel, pristine and unreadable. Damien, silent and stormy. Both staring at me like I was an investment they hadn't quite decided on. This wasn't just about a baby. There was something else underneath it all. Control, power, image. And yet, I didn't say no, because no one else had ever offered to save my sister's life. So I said, I'll do it. I'll move in. Isabel stood up gracefully. We'll have the paperwork finalized by this evening. A car will pick you up tomorrow at 9 a.m. Damien stayed seated, still watching me. And just before I stood to leave, he said, You're making a brave choice, Miss Hayes. I didn't know if it was praise or a warning. Back in the car, I stared out the window as the skyline blurred past. I should have been excited, relieved, $500,000 and a promise to save Ellie. Who wouldn't be? But all I could feel was a tight knot in my chest, because deep down, I already knew I wasn't just walking into a contract. I was walking into something far more complicated. By the time I got home that night, my tiny apartment felt even smaller. Ellie was asleep on the couch, curled up in a blanket that used to belong to our mom. The television flickered softly, playing reruns of some cartoon she always watched to relax. Her breathing was calm, peaceful. She had no idea her big sister had just agreed to carry a billionaire's child for $500,000. I stood there in the dim light, staring at her. Everything I was about to do was for her. Not for fame, not for money, just to buy time. A future. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed watching the ceiling fan spin, playing every possible scenario in my head. What if something went wrong? What if I miscarried? What if the Lancasters changed their minds? What if I did? The next morning, at 9 a.m. sharp, the same black town car pulled up outside my building. The driver opened the door for me like I was royalty, though I still wore the same thrift store coat I'd had for 2 winters. Inside the car, a folder sat on the seat. My name was on it. Sophie Hayes. Final agreement. It felt heavier than any textbook I'd ever held. We drove in silence. I tried not to read the documents just yet. Something told me this moment was about more than legal language. Once I signed, I couldn't go back. There would be no rewrites. No do-overs. We pulled up in front of a sleek gray building in Midtown, not the mansion. This place looked more like a law firm or a museum. Inside, the air smelled like polished floors and fear. A woman in a gray suit led me to a conference room with tinted windows and an impossibly long table. On one side sat 2 lawyers. On the other, Isabel Lancaster. She smiled when I entered, not warmly, not coldly, just formally. Miss Hayes, thank you for being punctual. I nodded. My throat was too dry to speak. One of the lawyers gestured to the seat across from Isabel. Please sit. We'll walk you through each section. The contract was over 20 pages long. Every word had been picked clean by a team of legal minds. Clauses about health, nutrition, sleep schedules, restricted activities, monthly check-ins, emotional wellness assessments, therapy sessions, no caffeine, no alcohol, no contact with unapproved individuals. Then came the most invasive parts. No romantic relationships during the pregnancy. No sexual activity. Immediate reporting of any physical contact outside medical supervision. It wasn't just about growing a baby. It was about becoming someone else's property for 9 months. And yet, it was all laid out in such professional, polished terms that it almost felt momo. I signed the initials at the bottom of each page with a borrowed pen. Came the final signature line, full name, date, consent. I hesitated for half a second. Not because I doubted my decision, but because I realized that from this moment on, I would no longer belong to myself completely. I signed. Isabel rose from her seat and extended her hand. Welcome to our family's journey. Her words felt rehearsed, like something she'd said before. Maybe to one of the other women who didn't make it. One of the lawyers handed me a black leather envelope with a seal on it. Inside is your first payment receipt, the security badge for the Lancaster property, and a digital file with your wellness schedule. I stood. My legs were a little shaky. When do I move in?
I asked. Now, Isabel said, smiling.
Your belongings will be collected. The car is waiting. I glanced down at the leather envelope. $500,000. Medical care. A chance to save my sister. So why did I feel like I just sold my soul? As we pulled away from the office, my phone buzzed. Ellie, how's the job interview? I swallowed hard before replying. Me. I got it. I'll be away for a while, but I'll video call you every day. Love you, Peanut. Ellie, love you more. I put the phone down and leaned my head against the window. New York raced past in flashes of glass and steel. I had just signed the contract of a lifetime. Now, I was headed to live with a billionaire couple. To grow their child. To disappear from the world. I knew, and somewhere deep inside me, I knew this wasn't just the beginning of a deal. It was the beginning of something irreversible. The mansion wasn't in Manhattan, as I'd first assumed. No. The Lancaster estate was tucked behind private gates in the hills outside the city. A place so exclusive it didn't appear on public maps. You couldn't call it a house, it was a compound. Steel and glass, modern but elegant, sprawling across a cliffside like a sculpture carved into the earth itself, the kind of place you only see in magazines or on TV when billionaires let the cameras in for 5 minutes to appear relatable. The car pulled up a long, winding driveway bordered by white stone and trimmed hedges. A fountain in the shape of a swan shimmered under the morning sun. At the top of the hill stood the house, angular, perfect, and intimidating. As soon as the vehicle stopped, a uniformed man opened my door. "Welcome, Miss Hayes," he said with a short bow. "I'm Graham, head of household staff." He spoke like he was reading from a script, but not rudely, more like I'd entered another world where everyone had a role and no one ever broke character. He gestured to the entrance. I stepped out of the car, feeling like I'd walked onto the set of a movie. The sun was too bright. My suitcase looked too cheap. Even my shoes suddenly felt like they didn't belong on these floors. Inside, the air was cool and scented with something floral and expensive, a smell I couldn't name. Not lavender, not vanilla. Something rare, custom. The foyer stretched 2 stories high, white marble floors. A chandelier made entirely of hand-blown glass. A grand staircase with polished railings. Everything gleamed like it had never seen dust. Or fingerprints. Or life. I stood there in silence. Then Isabel appeared. She walked down the stairs with the grace of a swan, wearing a pale beige suit that probably cost more than my entire childhood. Her hair was pulled back into a perfect low bun.
Her lips
were a soft mauve. Her heels didn't make a sound. She smiled, polite but distant. "I trust your trip was comfortable?" I nodded, unsure if she actually wanted an answer. "Come, let me show you your quarters." We walked in silence, through a series of hallways lined with paintings and mirrors. Not a single photo of family or childhood. No laughter in the air. No warmth in the walls. We stopped at a white double door. "This is your wing," she said. "You'll have full access to the guest library, private bath, and balcony. The wellness team will check in every morning. Meals are prepared by our in-house chef and tailored to your pregnancy plan." She opened the door, and I gasped. The room was larger than our entire apartment. High ceilings. A massive bed with silk sheets. A walk-in closet with shelves I'd never fill. A sitting area with soft armchairs. A fireplace, not that I'd need it. Floor-to-ceiling windows open to a private view of the forest below. And flowers.
dozens
Of fresh flowers in crystal vases. On the knitstand, the vanity, the coffee table. For a moment, I forgot why I was here. It felt like a dream. Then Isabel turned to me. "You'll begin your pre-pregnancy protocol tomorrow. There's a meditation session at 8 a.m. sharp. Breakfast at 9. You'll meet with the nutritionist and emotional wellness counselor in the afternoon." "Emotional wellness?" I asked. "Of course," she said smoothly. "You are carrying our child. We want to ensure your mind is as healthy as your body." She said it like a compliment, but I felt observed, dissected, like I was both guest and experiment. She placed a small box on the table near the bed. "This is your smart monitor. It tracks your sleep, movement, heart rate, and stress levels. Please wear it at all times." I opened it. A sleek white bracelet blinked to life. "Even the technology looked elegant. Dinner is served at 7, she added. "Formal attire is expected. Good rest, Miss Hayes." And with that, she was gone. I sat on the edge of the bed, stunned. Was this my life now? Silk pillows. A pregnancy plan, monitored emotions. I stood and walked slowly to the window. Below, a garden stretched into the woods. A path curved around a koi pond, perfectly manicured. Not a leaf out of place. Everything here was perfect. And suddenly, I missed the smell of Ellie's cereal. I missed the uneven hum of our heater. I missed home, but this was my choice. I turned and looked at the room again. A painting of a single white rose hung above the fireplace. Beautiful, isolated, just like me. And that's when I heard the knock. Gentle, unexpected. I opened the door. It was him. Damien. Wearing a dark suit without a tie. Sleeves rolled up, as if he'd come from work but wasn't ready to relax. His hair was slightly tousled. His expression? Calm but curious. Is this a good time? Sked. I froze. What was the right answer? I nodded. He looked past me into the room, then met my eyes. I wanted to make sure you're comfortable. I know this place can feel overwhelming at first. I swallowed, surprised by how different he seemed. Softer than the man in the boardroom, more human. It's a lot, I admitted. Beautiful, but different from what I'm used to.
He smiled, just a little. Different is a good word for this place.
A pause. He didn't step inside. Just stood there like he didn't want to cross a line. If there's anything you need, you come to me. Not the staff, me. Understood? Understood, I said quietly, and then he turned and walked away. I stood there in the doorway, heart racing. That was the first real moment I felt it. The shift, the danger, because the man I had just agreed to carry a child for be the one who could break me completely. I had exactly 20 minutes to get ready. 20 minutes to shower, figure out what formal attire meant in a billionaire's mansion, and somehow calm the small storm building in my chest since Damien's unexpected visit. I didn't even know if I imagined the intensity in his eyes. Maybe it was just politeness. Or maybe I wanted there to be something there, just to justify the way my pulse jumped every time he looked at me. I found a deep green dress hanging in the closet with a tag still attached. Soft silk, modest neckline, long sleeves. Someone had clearly chosen it for me in advance. There was no way they guessed my size by accident. It fit perfectly. At exactly 6:55 p.m. I followed the directions left on a printed schedule in my room and arrived at the dining hall. Yes, dining hall. Not room. The space was palatial with dark wood panels, a vaulted ceiling, and a long glass table that could seat at least 20. Only 3 chairs were set, one at each end and one in the middle. I stood awkwardly by the entrance until a butler, yes, a real butler, gestured toward the center chair. Miss Hayes, right this way. I sat down, unsure what to do with my hands. The utensils glinted under the soft chandelier light. The water glass was already filled. A napkin folded like origami waited beside the plate. Moments later, Isabel entered. She wore an ivory gown. Structured and elegant, her hair slicked into a low chignon. She didn't walk. She floated. Sophie, she said with a nod, sitting gracefully at the head of the table. You look lovely. Thank you, I murmured. That was a long pause before she spoke again. I remember what it was like. The first night I had dinner in this house. I felt completely out of place. That surprised me. I blinked. Really? Of course! I didn't grow up with all of this either. But then I learned the key isn't pretending to belong. It's acting like you do until no one questions it anymore. Before I could respond, a second set of footsteps entered the room. Damien. He wasn't wearing a jacket this time. Just a dark dress shirt, open at the collar, sleeves rolled casually up his forearms.
His watch gleamed as he moved. He didn't
look at me as he sat down across the table, but I felt his presence like a warm current. The air thickened. Evening, he said, more to the room than to either of us. Dinner began immediately. Course after course, served by silent staff, a delicate salad with edible flowers, some kind of creamy soup I couldn't pronounce, and a main dish of roasted fish over saffron rice. I tried to eat slowly, carefully. But the utensils felt too elegant for my clumsy hands. I worried I'd drop something, spill something. My every movement felt watched. Halfway through the meal, Isabel turned to me. How are you finding the room? The staff? It's all very generous. Thank you. She nodded once, then took a small bite of her fish. Damien finally looked up from his plate. Do you paint, Sophie?
His question startled me. I looked at him. What? In your file.
It says you studied fine arts. I flushed. I didn't think he'd actually read my file. I used to. I wanted to go to RISD, but things changed, life happened. His eyes held mine. You still could. I'm kind of occupied for the next 9 months, I said, trying to smile. A flicker of something passed over his face. Regret? Guilt? I couldn't tell. Isabel set her wine glass down. After the baby is born, of course you'll have more options, financially. Her voice was smooth, but the subtext was sharp. Don't get too comfortable. I nodded. I just want to do this right. That was the only thing I could say. The true thing. A long silence followed. The tension was subtle, but real. Isabel looked poised, Damien unreadable, eventually. Dessert was brought, something tiny and perfectly shaped with a raspberry on top. I didn't even touch it. As the meal ended, Isabel rose. We dine at this hour every evening. Punctuality is expected. A printed schedule will be delivered each morning. She offered a tight smile. Have a restful night. Then she walked out of the room. Damien remained seated. For a moment. It was just the two of us in that enormous space. He looked at me again, more gently this time. Don't let her get in your head, he said quietly. My chest tightened. She doesn't scare me, I whispered. Good. He stood, hands in his pockets, and looked at me like he wanted to say more. But he didn't single quotes teed instead. He turned and walked out, leaving me alone at the massive table, heart pounding. Thoughts tangled. It wasn't just a dinner. It was a beginning. Something was shifting between us. And deep down, I already knew this wouldn't stay professional for long. The first morning in the Lancaster mansion felt like waking up inside a snow globe, beautiful, silent, and not entirely real. I'd barely opened my eyes when I heard a soft knock on the door. Miss Hayes? Came a voice from the hallway. It was a woman named Marla, the wellness coordinator. She was early 40s, polite, clinical. Everything about her felt like a walking brochure. Tidy ponytail, pastel yoga gear, and a clipboard glued to her hand. Good morning, she said as I opened the door in a robe. Ready for your first wellness check? Ready? No. Awake? Barely. She smiled anyway and walked me through a gentle fitness routine, breathing exercises, a blood pressure check, and a weigh-in. We like to start monitoring from day 1. She said cheerfully. Everything was logged on her tablet. My heartbeat, blood oxygen, hydration levels. Then she handed me a small square device. This is your personal tracker. It syncs to the bracelet you received last night. You'll wear it daily. It sends real-time data to our system so we can adjust your diet, supplements, and activity. As needed, I blinked. Real-time? You're tracking everything? She smiled brightly. Of course. We can't take risks with a pregnancy this important. Important. Not yours. Not precious. Just ... important. She handed me a printed schedule. Every hour was planned. Meditation, meals, emotional wellness check-ins, walks in the garden, nutrition sessions, rest periods. No gaps. No freedom. Just structure. At the bottom of the schedule. A note. Social media access, blocked, outside calls. By request only, unscheduled outings, prohibited. I felt my chest tighten. I wasn't just living here. I was being managed. After Marla left, I took a long shower in the marble bathroom. It was bigger than the kitchen in our apartment. The water pressure was perfect. The towels were softer than clouds. And yet I felt trapped. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, still wearing the bracelet that pulsed with a soft green light. I wasn't even pregnant yet, and already, I didn't belong to myself. At lunch, I met with Tessa, the emotional wellness coach. She sat across from me in a cozy office that smelled faintly of eucalyptus. She asked questions like, how do you respond to pressure? Do you have a history of anxiety? Have you ever felt emotionally attached to someone else's child? I tried to answer calmly, honestly. But with each question, I realized they weren't trying to support me. They were trying to profile me. To predict how I'd react later. To control it. That night, I skipped dessert again. At dinner, Isabel made polite conversation about art auctions and European fashion. Damien remained mostly silent, but I felt his eyes on me more than once. At one point, I dropped my fork. It made a sharp clang against the porcelain plate. I flinched. Isabel's smile didn't even falter. No worries, she said gently. You'll get used to the rhythm of this house. I forced a smile, but something about the way she said it chilled me. After dinner, I returned to my room and found a box on the bed. Inside was a pale pink dress with a note. For your first blood draw tomorrow. Let's make a good impression. Later that night, I sat on the balcony outside my room, looking out at the dark woods that bordered the estate. The stars were bright. The air smelled like pine and silence. My phone buzzed. A message from Ellie. Ellie, miss you already. The house is too quiet. I left you a drawing under your pillow. Love you. Tears stung my eyes. I rushed to check. There it was, a folded piece of paper taped under the corner of the pillow, a crayon drawing of us holding hands, with a big red heart above our heads. And just like that, I remembered why I was here, why I agreed to this, why I'd keep going, no matter how many rules. They made me follow for her. Just as I curled into bed, a knock came at the door again. I froze. Sophie. It was Damien. I sat up. 1 second, I called, slipping into my robe. When I opened the door, he stood there, same calm demeanor, but this time, holding a small envelope. You dropped this at dinner, he said. It was my schedule. Folded neatly. But that wasn't why he was really there. I could see it in his eyes. He didn't leave. He looked at me for a long moment before speaking again. Are you ... I hesitated. I'm trying. If it ever becomes too much, he said quietly, you tell me. Not Isabel, me. I nodded slowly, and before he turned to go, he added, they can make rules, Sophie, but they can't decide who you are. Then he disappeared down the hallway, leaving me breathless. Maybe I was wrong to trust him. Maybe I wasn't. But in that moment, the rules felt just a little less heavy, because someone in this house might actually see me. The mansion looked flawless from the outside, gleaming surfaces, pristine hallways, curated silence, but silence can hide 1,000 fractures. And that night, I heard one of them crack. It was nearly midnight. I couldn't sleep. The schedule said lights out by 10, but my thoughts didn't follow schedules. My body lay still, but my mind wandered, mostly to Ellie, sometimes to Damien, and often to the growing unease in my chest. I slipped out of bed, pulled on a sweater, and padded barefoot down the hallway. The mansion at night was hauntingly quiet. No voices, no footsteps. Just the soft hum of hidden air vents and the echo of my breath. I thought maybe I'd visit the guest library. Marla had said it was open for personal use after hours. I could read, clear my head, remind myself who I used to be before I became ... as I turned the corner near the stairs. I heard it. Voices. Tense. Low, heated. I froze. The door to one of the sitting rooms was half open. I shouldn't have stopped. But something in me, curiosity or instinct, kept me still. It was Damien and Isabel, and they were arguing quietly, sharply, like two people trained not to raise their voices but fully capable of destroying each other with words alone. She's doing everything we asked, Damien said. You don't need to monitor her every breath. We are paying her $500,000, Damien, Isabel replied. She doesn't get to rewrite the process. She's not a machine. She's an asset. This is a transaction. Don't romanticize it. The room went still for a second. I heard ice clink in a glass. Then his voice softer. You know, it's not just about the baby anymore. Silence. Then. Isabel, colder than I'd ever heard her. Is that what this is? Damien didn't answer. She exhaled, sharp and bitter. Every time, every woman we try to bring in, you sabotage it. You find something wrong. You get too involved. No, he said simply. I find something real. The words hit me like a shockwave. Was he talking about me? Isabel's heels tapped against the floor as she paced. You want real? You want emotion? That's not what this life is. This life is built on control, on choices. You knew that when we signed our first deal. You just don't like remembering it. I remember, Damien said quietly. But I'm allowed to want more now. Not with her. Isabel snapped. I stepped back before I could hear anything else. I shouldn't have listened at all. In my room. I sat on the bed, pulse racing. The contract, the control, the fact that they'd done this before. Multiple times. I wasn't the first, but I could be the last, because something between them was splintering, and I had just become the center of it. The next morning I expected Isabel to look different. To glare at me, to speak colder than usual. But she didn't. She greeted me at breakfast with a smile like porcelain. "Good morning, Sophie. You slept well, I hope?" "Yes," I lied. Damien didn't join us. Halfway through breakfast, Isabel set her cup down and spoke without looking at me. "You seem thoughtful lately." I swallowed. "Just adjusting." She nodded. "Adjustment is a test. Some pass, some don't." It felt like a warning, but I kept my smile, because now I knew something she didn't know. I'd heard they weren't a team, they were opponents wearing matching rings, and I was standing between them. Later that day, Marla brought me to a new room. Small, warm, lined with candles. Guided meditation, she called it. But all I could think about was that sitting room. That fight. Damien wanted something real. And somehow I'd become that. The question now wasn't if the house would break. It was how long I could stay standing in the middle of it. I didn't see Damien for the next 2 days. Not at breakfast. Not in the hallways. Not even in the shadows of the mansion where I'd gotten used to spotting his presence without trying. He had vanished. And I couldn't decide if that made things easier or harder. Isabel remained perfectly polite. Smiling. Structured. Unreadable. I'd played my part too. 8, when I was told. Walked through gardens I no longer admired. Attended wellness check-ins that felt more like quiet interrogations, but something had shifted, and I couldn't pretend. I didn't feel it. It happened on the third night. Rain began falling just after sunset. Not a storm, but a slow, steady rhythm that tapped gently on the windows like it had a message to deliver. I was restless again. No matter how beautiful the room was, it didn't feel like mine. The sheets were too crisp, the silence too curated. My mind wouldn't stop spinning. I needed air. I pulled a sweater over my pajamas and slipped out barefoot into the hallway. My plan was to sneak to the library and read until I could fall asleep. Instead, I heard piano music. Soft, distant, not coming from a speaker. Real. I followed the sound like a thread through the halls. It led to a room I hadn't entered before. A smaller sitting area tucked behind frosted glass doors. The light inside was low, golden, warm. And there he was. Damien Dallon, seated at a grand piano. His head slightly bowed, fingers moving gracefully over the keys. The music was slow and aching, not classical, not structured, improvised, like he was pouring something out of himself he didn't know how to say out loud. I stood there, watching, invisible in the doorway. Something about the scene unraveled me. This wasn't the CEO, the husband. The man with a contract in a cold house. This was someone else. When the last note faded, he looked up. And saw me. We stared at each other across the quiet. I should have apologized, should have turned and walked away, but instead, I stepped inside. "That was beautiful," I said softly. He didn't look surprised to see me. Just. "I don't play for people," he replied. "Not anymore. I won't tell." That made him smile, the smallest smile, but real. He closed the piano lid gently. "Couldn't sleep?" I shook my head. "Not really." "Same." A pause stretched between us. Not uncomfortable, just. Did gestured to the chair across from him. I sat. For a long moment we didn't speak. Then he asked, "Do you regret it?" I looked at him. "Being here?" He nodded. About it. The money, the rules, the surveillance. The way Isabel looked at me like a science experiment. But then I saw Ellie's drawing still folded in my bedside drawer. Her heartbeat. Her future. And Damien sitting across from me, no longer hidden behind walls of power. "No," I said finally. "I don't regret it. I'm just.
He nodded slowly, as if he understood more than he said. "I was scared too," he said. "That surprised me." "Of what?"
He looked past me, toward the rain-specked window. Of becoming the man people expected me to be. Of building a life so perfect on the outside that I couldn't breathe inside it. My chest tightened. He wasn't talking about the mansion or the contract. He was talking about his marriage. He glanced at me again. "You're not what I expected." "Sorry," I said, unsure if it was a compliment or a warning. "Don't be you're real." That word again. Real. It sat between us like a fragile thread. And suddenly, I realized how long it had been since someone looked at me like I was a person, not a role, not a service. He stood slowly, walked to the window, and stared out at the trees swaying in the wind. She wanted this child more than anything, he said, but sometimes I wonder if it was ever about love. I didn't answer because I wasn't sure who he meant anymore. Her. Or the child. He turned back toward me, expression unreadable now. You should get some rest, he said. Tomorrow is a big day. Tomorrow? Your implantation appointment. It's scheduled for 10 a.m. I swallowed hard. Somehow, with everything else, I had forgotten how close we were to it all becoming real. I nodded and stood. Good night, I said. Sophie. I turned back. He looked at me like he wanted to say something else. But he quotes. Sleep well. And then I left, walking back through a house that suddenly didn't feel so hollow that night. I lay in bed listening to the rain, replaying every word we'd said. He wasn't supposed to be part of this. He wasn't supposed to see me, but he did. And worse, I had started to see him too. The house was still. The rain had stopped, but my thoughts were loud. I kept staring at the ceiling, wondering what would happen if my body failed, if it rejected the embryo. If I disappointed everyone, especially Ellie. By 7 a.m. I was dressed in the pale blue lounge set the staff had left out for me, my bracelet blinking with perfect vitals. Marla arrived promptly at 8 o'clock, clipboard in hand. Voice extra sweet. Today's the big day, Miss Hayes. The medical team is ready for you. She handed me a cup of herbal tea and went over the list of things I already knew. Procedure time, recovery schedule, and the promise of full sedation. So you won't feel a thing. Except I felt everything. Not physically. Emotionally. My whole life was about to shift on a cellular level. The procedure was clean, efficient. Almost too quiet. The sterile white room, the gloved hands, the soft instructions from the doctor delivered with practiced calm. I lay there drifting in and out of a haze, feeling like I had stepped out of my own body and was watching someone else live my life. When I woke, I was in a recovery suite, dim lights, warm blanket, soft music. Marla stood beside me. Everything went well. Now. We wait. The next several days were a blur, bed rest, gentle walks, silent meals. Isabel hovered more than usual, asking questions about how I felt, what I needed, if I'd been sleeping enough. Her tone was always calm, but something in her eyes had sharpened. Like a hawk watching for cracks, Damien stayed away. I thought about the piano. The way he looked at me. I told myself not to dwell on it, but I did. Every night. 7 days after the procedure, I was brought to the in-house clinic on the lower level for the test. Nurse gave me the small white stick and led me to a private bathroom. I stared at it for a long time, just plastic and chemicals. And yet, it held the power to rewrite everything. I followed the instructions. Set the test on the sink. Washed my hands slowly, just to delay the moment. Then I looked. Lines. Too clear. Undeniable lines. Positive. I was pregnant. The nurse returned silently. Took the test. Didn't smile. Just nodded and disappeared through the glass door. I sat there numb. I had imagined this moment so many times. But it didn't feel the way I thought it would. There was no swelling music, no burst of light, just the quiet awareness that I was no longer alone inside my body. A few minutes later, the door opened again. This time, it was Damien. His presence filled the room like the sudden hush before a storm. He didn't say anything at first. Just looked at me. Then, it worked. I nodded. 2 lines. He stepped closer, carefully, like I might break if he moved too fast. How do you feel? I didn't know how to answer. There were too many feelings, tangled and wordless. Different, I whispered. Like everything just got very real. He knelt in front of the chair, surprising me, and placed his hand gently, not on me but on the armrest. Close, but not crossing the line. You're not alone in this, he said softly. No matter what happens. I looked at him. And in his eyes I saw something I hadn't expected. Relief, not joy, not celebration. Just deep, private relief. Like he'd been holding his breath for years and could finally exhale. Before I could say anything, the door opened. Again, Isabel flawless as ever. She took one look at the two of us and smiled, tightly. I take it we're confirmed? I stood, clearing my throat. Yes. She walked forward, ignoring the intimacy of the moment, and took the test from the nurse. Wonderful. We'll increase your caloric intake starting tomorrow. You'll be scheduled for your first scan in 5 days. I nodded. She turned to Damien. We should inform the foundation board, quietly.
He stood, hands in his pockets. Give it a few days. Her eyes narrowed. Why wait?
Because it's not just about a press release, he replied coolly. They stared at each other for a beat. Then she turned back to me. Congratulations, Sophie. You're now carrying the future of this family. I swallowed the weight of that sentence. She walked out. Heels clicking. Damien remained for a second longer. If you need anything, he said gently, you know where to find me. And then he followed her. Back in my room, I changed into pajamas, climbed into bed, and curled up with the blanket pulled high over my chest. I pressed my hand against my stomach, flat, unchanged. But inside something had begun, not just a heartbeat, a story. And I had no idea how it would end. The news spread through the house like perfume, soft, lingering, but impossible to ignore. I was pregnant. I was carrying their child. The staff moved around me with a new kind of silence. Not cold, just more careful. More reverent, like I had transformed from guest to artifact. Something valuable. Fragile, untouchable. Meals became more specific. Vitamins appeared on my tray before I could ask. My walks were now accompanied by a staff member just in case. Though no one said those words out loud, I had become the center of everything. And yet I felt more isolated than ever, except when he was near. Damien didn't speak much at breakfast or dinner. He rarely made eye contact in front of Isabel. But when we crossed paths in the hallways, when the staff wasn't looking, when I stood too long in the conservatory just to breathe, he'd find me. Sometimes it was only a glance. Sometimes a quiet, "How are you feeling?" Or a rare moment in the library, when I'd look up from a book and find him watching from the second floor railing. But the most unexpected moment came during my third wellness check. I was seated on the edge of the exam table in the in-house clinic. Marla was reviewing my chart when Damien walked in, not Isabel. Just him. He paused, saw me, and nodded to Marla. May I speak with Miss Hayes alone for a moment? Marla blinked. She looked confused, but not brave enough to say no. Of course, I'll return in a few minutes. She left, heels echoing. He closed the door softly behind her. I shifted in place. Everything okay? I asked. He hesitated before speaking. I just to check in. Us? What Marla's for? I joked weakly. He smiled. But it didn't reach his eyes. Marla can't tell me what I really want to know. I tilted my head. Which is? He stepped closer, careful as ever. Are you sleeping? Are you scared? Do you feel safe? That last word stopped me. Safe. I didn't expect him to ask that. I'm trying, I said honestly. To adjust. It's not easy. His voice softened. You're handling this with more grace than most adults I know, including me. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. I looked down at my hands. You don't have to say that. I'm not saying it for you, he replied. I'm saying it because it's true. Our eyes met. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't electric. But it was real human later that afternoon. I found a small sketchbook in my room. Blank. Pristine. A single note clipped to the cover. You shouldn't stop creating just because you're busy surviving. D. I ran my fingers over the smooth paper, my throat tight. No one had ever encouraged me to keep drawing before. Not since high school, not since my mother's accident, not since I gave up art for hospital bills and cheap rent. I picked up a pencil and began sketching. Not the house. Not the flowers or food or fancy gowns. I drew eyes, his eyes. At dinner, Isabel noticed. She always did. You're glowing tonight, she said, sipping water from a crystal glass. Pregnancy does that, I replied, trying to smile. She tilted her head slightly. Of course, though I've also noticed a certain lightness in you. As if something else has lifted your spirits. I said nothing. She placed her napkin down and leaned forward, elbows barely touching the tablecloth. I hope we can agree to keep our relationship professional, Sophie, for everyone's sake. There was no smile in her voice this time. No. Warmth. Just precision. I met her eyes. I'm doing everything the contract requires. She held my gaze. For a second too long. Then smiled again. Wonderful. Damien didn't speak, but he didn't look away either. That night, a storm rolled in. The sky flashed with white fire. Thunder shook the walls. I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I stood by the window, hand resting lightly over my stomach. Still nothing. No bump. No flutter. Just the knowledge that something had taken root. And I was no longer living just for myself. Knock broke the silence. Soft. Familiar. I opened the door. It was Damien. Wet from the rain. Hair tousled. No explanation. We didn't speak. He didn't step inside. But his eyes, those same eyes I'd sketched earlier, met mine with something unspoken. Then he simply said, "You matter," and turned to leave. No grand gesture. No promises. Just that. And for the first time in a long time. I believed it. I barely slept the night before the procedure. I should have known the peace wouldn't last. In this house, nothing gentle remains untouched for long. The morning after the storm, the house felt colder. The air was the same. The temperature unchanged. But something beneath the surface had shifted, like the hum of the mansion had lost its harmony. Breakfast came later than usual. No Isabel. No Damien. Just Marla, dropping off a new packet on my tray with an overly neutral smile. "From Mrs. Lancaster," she said, then quickly turned and left. Inside the folder was a revised pregnancy protocol. The schedule had doubled in length. New sessions were added. Additional physical therapy, 2 emotional resilience appointments per week, and a dietary consultation with a woman I'd never met. Most notable, all unmonitored outdoor walks were now prohibited. No more fresh air unless supervised. No more alone time in the garden. No more choices. Later that day, I was summoned to Isabel's personal lounge, a space I had never been invited into before. It was immaculate. Silver and cream furniture. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves arranged by color. Everything in that room whispered power. Quiet, unshakable power. She sat with her legs crossed, sipping from a porcelain teacup. I stood, unsure if I was supposed to speak. She smiled. "Please sit." I obeyed, folding my hands in my lap. She didn't speak at first. Just studied me, the way you might study a piece of art you're not sure you like. Then, "Sophie, I think it's time we reminded ourselves of the purpose of this arrangement." I swallowed. "Of course. You're here to carry a child my husband and I have tried for longer than you could imagine. A child that represents legacy, reputation, continuity." I nodded. "I understand." She leaned forward slightly. "This is not a love story." That landed like a slap. My breath hitched, but I kept my expression calm. "I know. Do you?" she asked. Softly, but the edge was sharp. "Because it's easy, in houses like this, to forget who you are. To mistake comfort for affection, security for freedom." She stood and walked slowly toward the window. "You are part of something important, Sophie. And with importance comes responsibility." Then she turned back. "And boundaries." There. It was not a threat, a declaration, that afternoon. The chef delivered lunch to my room instead of the dining hall. There was no explanation, only a note. "We've noticed your stress levels rising. For your health, it's best to avoid unnecessary stimulation." I stared at the food and felt my appetite vanish for the first time. I didn't feel like a guest in the Lancaster home. I felt like a prisoner. The final blow came that evening. Delivery appeared in my room while I was in the shower. A new gown for the formal dinner. Emerald. Silk. Floor length. Backless. Beautiful. And revealing. At first, I thought it was from Damien. But when I checked the tag, I found a small folded card tucked in the lining. "Wear this. Smile. Show the world you're exactly where you belong." Dinner that night was hosted in a different room, one I'd never been in before, filled with long mirrors and tall candles. Guests were present, a handful of investors, one board member from the Lancasters Foundation, and an editor from a fashion magazine. It wasn't just a meal. It was a display. I sat at Damien's right, Isabel at his left. The guests asked polite questions. I gave polite answers, but under the table my hands were trembling. Damien didn't speak much. But once, when I hesitated answering a question about my future plans after delivery, his fingers brushed mine under the table just long enough to still me. He was telling me, silently, I see what she's doing, but he didn't stop it because this wasn't his house. Not really when the guests left. Isabel kissed Damien lightly on the cheek and disappeared down the hallway. He remained seated. So fizzy with silence I could barely breathe. Finally, I spoke. She's trying to break. He looked at me, eyes tired. She's testing you. There's a difference? He didn't answer, just leaned back and closed his eyes for a moment longer than necessary. Then stood. You're stronger than she thinks. He walked away, and I was left sitting in silk and candlelight, surrounded by empty wine glasses and carefully crafted lies. Later that night, I stared into the mirror. No makeup. No dress. Just me, just Sophie, and I whispered to my reflection, You're not going to break. Because I wasn't doing this just for money. Or for the child. I was doing it for who I'd become when it was over. Some things don't need to be said out loud. You feel them in a glance. In the way someone hesitates before walking away. And how silence stretches, but never breaks. That's what happened between me and Damien. It didn't explode. It grew quietly. Days passed after the dinner with the guests. The tension never fully left the walls, but it shifted, became less visible, more subtle. Isabel's schedule became even stricter, but the formality only made her less present. She began traveling for her foundation events, leaving me alone in the house more often. But Damien stayed, and when Isabel left, the air around him changed. He didn't hide anymore, the first time I noticed. I was reading in the garden, under the covered terrace. It was late afternoon. The breeze was soft. My tea was untouched beside me. I had sketched something on the corner of the page. A sleeping baby, cradled in hands larger than mine. Then I felt it, that quiet awareness. I looked up. He was standing across the stone path, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on me. Not on my body. Not on the baby growing inside me. He walked toward me slowly. May I? He asked. I nodded, and he sat beside me, not too close, not too far. We didn't speak for a while. Then he said, You look peaceful here. I looked around. It's the only place I'm not being watched. He raised an eyebrow. You're being watched everywhere in this house. I know, I replied softly, but here it feels like I can pretend. A pause, then gently, What would you do if you weren't here? It wasn't a question I expected. I stared ahead at the trees. I'd go back to school, finish my degree, start teaching art to kids who think they're not good enough to try. Why that? Because someone once told me I wasn't good enough, and I believed them. Damien's jaw tensed slightly. Whoever said that was wrong. He said it with certainty. I didn't know how to respond. So I didn't, but when I glanced at him again, I saw the storm behind his calm. He wasn't just talking about me. He was remembering someone he used to be. Someone
he might have given up on. That night I found another gift on my pillow. A small
set of watercolors. No note. But I knew who it was from. The next morning, Isabel returned. Her heels echoed louder than usual. Her smile was tighter, and during breakfast, she didn't speak to me. Not once, but when I stood to leave, she said, too sweetly, You've been glowing lately, Sophie. That's a good sign. Hormones, maybe? I nodded. Or sleep. She tilted her head. Sleep. I met her eyes. Yes, I've been sleeping well lately. Especially on the days you're not here. For the first time, she blinked. Just once. Then smiled. How charming.
Later.
That day, during my emotional wellness session, the counselor asked a strange question. Do you ever feel conflicted about your role in the household? I blinked. What do you mean? She leaned forward. You're carrying a child that belongs to another woman. Do you ever feel possessive, resentful, attached? I froze. That question didn't come from her. It came from Isabel. I know my role, I said calmly. She nodded, typing something, but my hands were trembling, because for the first time, I couldn't tell where the line was anymore, and maybe I didn't want to, that evening. I returned to the piano room. Empty. I sat on the bench and ran my fingers along the edge of the keys. I wasn't expecting anyone, but then I heard the door. Damien stepped in. He looked tired. But when he saw me, something in him eased. Didn't know you played, he said. I just sit here sometimes. He walked closer slowly. I think about what this house used to feel like, he said. Before all of this. I didn't ask what this meant. We both knew. He sat beside me on the bench. Our shoulders touched. Neither of us moved. He looked straight ahead. Do you ever wish you could rewind time? Only every day. Silence. Then he turned slightly, enough to face me. Our eyes met. His hand hovered near mine on the piano bench, but he didn't touch me. He didn't have to. Should have known the peace wouldn't last. I should have known the peace wouldn't last. It started with a vibration on the marble counter, then another and another. 3 phones. In 3 rooms, lit up at once. I didn't know it yet. But the fuse had been lit. That morning began like any other. The new protocol had softened slightly. Isabel had been away again, supposedly at a wellness retreat in Colorado. Damien was working from his study. I had the morning to myself, something that had become a rare gift. I took a slow walk in the side garden, my steps light, one hand resting gently over my growing belly. 5 weeks pregnant now. Still invisible to the eye, but I could feel the difference in my body, in my breath, in my bones. When I returned to my suite, I noticed Marla standing near the door with a strange look on her face. Phone in hand, eyes wide. Is everything okay? I asked it. She blinked, like she'd forgotten I existed. Then, with a forced smile, you should go to the lounge, now. I found Damien already there, standing in front of the large TV, jaw tight, arms crossed. On screen was a still photo. Grainy, but unmistakable. Me. Walking beside Damien. In the Lancaster garden. Smiling. The headline in bold white letters. Billionaire power couple hiding a secret. Mystery woman seen at Star Island estate amid pregnancy rumors. My stomach turned cold. I stepped closer. What is this? Damien didn't look at me. Someone leaked a photo. Likely a drone, Isabel? No, she wouldn't risk that kind of attention. Then who?
He turned, his expression unreadable. It doesn't matter, the damage is done. I stared at the image.
My smile. The way his hand hovered near mine, not quite touching. To someone outside this house. It looked intimate. Too intimate. Damien muted the volume and sighed. There's speculation. Nothing confirmed, but it's spreading fast. What do we do? Before he could answer, Isabel stormed in. Hair pulled back, trench coat still on. Phone to her ear. I want it scrubbed from every feed within the hour, she said, sharp and crisp. No, I don't care about precedent. This is a violation of private property and medical confidentiality. If you can't fix it, I'll find someone who can. She hung up and threw her phone onto the velvet chaise, her eyes locked onto me. This is what I warned you about. I took a step back. I didn't do anything. You existed, she snapped. Damien stepped between us. Enough! She turned on him. Don't defend her. This isn't about her. This is about us, our reputation, our future.
He didn't flinch. No, this is about you, and control.
And the fact that people are watching now, and for once, you don't get to script the narrative. Her mouth twitched. The storm was here. The rest of the day unfolded in whispers and locked doors. PR team arrived before sunset. I wasn't invited to the meeting. Instead, I was sent back to my suite with new instructions. Stay indoors, avoid windows, no phone calls. All communication would be filtered through. Marla. My suite felt smaller than ever, like a cage wrapped in velvet. Hours passed. Night fell. And then a knock. Damien. He entered quietly, like someone carrying bad news. You're going to be moved, he said. I froze. Moved where?
A second property for now, just until this dies down.
Isabel's idea?
He didn't answer. I felt my throat close. So I'm being hidden. He stepped closer. You're being protected.
No, Damien, I whispered. You're ashamed of this. Of me. He reached out, not touching, just hovering. Don't say that. You don't know what I'm fighting. Then tell me. Silence. That was his answer. He didn't say the words. He couldn't, and suddenly, I realized what I already knew. He felt something. He just wasn't ready to admit it. Not to me. Not to her. Maybe not even to himself. The next morning, my bags were packed for me. I didn't speak to Isabel. She didn't. Say goodbye. Marla escorted me to a black car with tinted windows. As we drove past the mansion gates, I looked back one last time. The estate was still beautiful, still silent, still perfect. But I didn't feel safe there anymore. And worse, I didn't feel wanted. The safe house was smaller, tucked into the keys, still luxurious, still guarded, but distant. No piano. No conservatory. No Damien. Just, and the baby. And a silence that wasn't peaceful anymore. It was lonely. Some silences are soft. Some are necessary. But the one in that house in the keys? It was neither. It was the kind of silence that echoed. The kind that filled every corner like fog. Too thick to breathe through. Too heavy to outrun. I had been at the safe house for 6 days. The staff was minimal, polite, distant. A housekeeper named Lillian brought me meals and vitamins on a strict schedule. A nurse came in twice daily to monitor vitals. No one made eye contact for too long. There were no spontaneous visits. No piano music. No half sketches left on folded napkins. And no Damien. I hadn't heard from him once. No text. No calls. No notes hidden in the creases of my sketchbook. Nothing. First, I told myself he was protecting me. Then I started wondering if he was forgetting me. I tried to distract myself. I walked the perimeter garden twice a day. I painted. I read. I tried writing letters I never sent. To my sister. To my old self. To the child growing inside me. But it all felt hollow. Because how do you write when the person you're becoming no longer matches the life you had? On the 7th day, I woke from a dream that felt like a memory. I was back in the Lancaster mansion, barefoot, walking across the marble floor. Damien stood at the far end of the hall. He looked up, saw me, and smiled. The kind of smile that reaches through years. But when I tried to walk toward him, the floor shifted beneath me. Suddenly, I was sinking. He didn't move, just watched me fall. I woke up gasping. Alone. Again. Didn't cry until midday. It even dramatic. I had dropped a spoon. It clanged against the tile floor. And I just stood there, staring at it. Then my knees gave out. I didn't scream, didn't sob, just quietly broke. Lillian found me sitting there 10 minutes later. She didn't say anything, just crouched down, picked up the spoon, and gently took my hand. That small act of kindness almost undid me completely. That night, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I called Josh back home. We hadn't spoken much since I left. I'd made up a story about an art residency and told him I'd be out of state for a while. He had believed me, but I needed something familiar, someone who remembered me before all of this. When he picked up, his voice was sleepy but warm. Sophie, hi. Are you okay? Are you okay? That question. Simple. Dangerous. I almost lied. But instead I whispered, no. He didn't ask for details. Didn't press. Just stayed on the line. Sometimes silence means something. Sometimes. It heals. After I hung up, I sat by the window. The ocean was dark. Endless. But I knew something now, something I hadn't allowed myself to believe before. I was more than a contract, more than a name on a medical file, more than a glowing woman in a magazine rumor. I was still me, and I still mattered, even if no one came for me. But someone did. 2 days later, I was sketching by the poolside, the wind tugging gently at the pages, when I heard a voice. Familiar. Low. Dash. I wasn't sure you'd still be here. I turned. Damien. He looked different, unshaven, sleepless, but real. My heart didn't leap. It clenched, because his presence was not an apology. It was a question, and I wasn't sure if I had an answer. Why now? I asked. He didn't look away. Because I couldn't stay away anymore. I laughed. Bitter, tired. But you could stay silent? He stepped closer. I thought giving you space was the right thing. No, Damien, it was the safe thing, for you.
He swallowed. You're right.
I stood, the sketchbook forgotten. Do you even know what this is anymore? Me? This baby? US? He didn't respond right away then. No.
His.
Honesty stunned me. But he wasn't done. But I know what it's not. It's not just a contract anymore. It's not just an arrangement. It's not just a solution to a problem. He stepped forward slowly. I didn't fall for you because you were carrying my child, Sophie. I fell for you in spite of it. I stared at him, then whispered, "And what about Isabel?" A shadow crossed his face. She knew. Long before I admitted it to myself. That's why she sent you here. Not to protect you, to punish us both. I looked down, everything inside me was shaking. He stepped even closer. But I'm done pretending. I want to do what I should have done from the beginning, which is...
He exhaled. Choose you. Choose you.
His words hung in the air like a suspended breath. I want to do what I should have done from the beginning. He'd said and then, I choose you. 3 words. Simple. Beautiful. But I had learned that beauty could be deceptive. I didn't run into his arms, didn't cry, didn't smile. I just stood there, staring at him like someone trying to see past the skin because what I needed now wasn't love at first sight. It was truth. Earned. Lived. Fought for. And I wasn't sure he was ready for that. It's not that easy. I said quietly. He nodded. I know. You say you choose me, Damien. But you've had so many chances. And every time you chose safety. Comfort, Isabel.
He didn't deny it. You're right, he said. I was a coward. I blinked.
I hadn't expected him to say it out loud. Everything in my life has been managed, controlled, even love. Especially love? He took a step closer, his voice softer now. You don't fit in that world, Sophie. That's what makes you impossible and irresistible. I gave a small, bitter smile. So I'm the exception. No, you're the reason I want to burn the rulebook. He reached for my hand. I let him hold it. Not out of surrender, but curiosity. What does love feel like when it finally means something? His thumb brushed over my knuckles. His hand was warm, steady. Mine was trembling. What about her? I asked. He exhaled slowly. We've been over for longer than we've admitted. We were partners, strategists, never soulmates. And the baby? Still ours, still yours, still mine. But if we do this right, maybe it doesn't have to be a tragedy. Maybe it can be the beginning of something we never planned. I pulled my hand away, gently, because I needed a moment. I needed to feel me again. Later that day, I sat alone on the back deck of the safe house. The ocean stretched out before me. Endless and honest, I closed my eyes and remembered everything that had brought me here. My sister, the contract, the first time I stepped into the mansion. The quiet kindness in Damien's eyes, the fury in Isabel's smile, the way my heart ached when I realized I wasn't just a vessel. I was a woman, a whole woman. With needs, with limits. With love. With power. When I returned inside, Damien was still there. Waiting. Not asking, not begging. Just waiting. I stood in front of him. I need 3 things.
I said. He straightened. Anything.
1, I'm not hiding again. No more sending me away, no more treating me like a liability. If I'm in this, I'm in. He nodded. Done. 2, I raised this baby with you on my terms. I'm not handing over a life like a product. This child is mine just as much as yours. His throat moved as he swallowed hard. Agreed. And 3, I need to hear you say it. Not just that you want me. Not just that you choose me. I need to know why. He looked me in the eyes, not like a billionaire, not like a broken husband, just like a man. Because you remind me that I'm still capable of love. Because you challenge every part of me that's gone numb. Because when I'm with you, I want to be better, not richer, not respected, just ... I took a deep breath, then stepped forward ... and kissed him ... It wasn't a kiss of fairy tales. It was a kiss of reality. Of second chances, of forgiveness not yet spoken but already begun. It was ours. That night, we lay in silence on the wide sofa of the safe house living room. Not tangled up. Just side by side. Our hands barely touching. The baby still weeks from showing, but already changing everything. He looked over at me, voice low. What do we tell the world? I smiled. That 2 people made a mistake. And then they made something better. The car ride back to Star Island was quiet, not uncomfortable, not heavy. Just quiet. Like the breath you take before a leap. It had been 12 days since I left that house. Now. As we passed through the wrought iron gates and wound up the pristine drive, the mansion looked exactly the same. Too perfect, too still. But I was different. So was Damien and Isabel. We were about to find out. Charles opened the front door. He didn't flinch when he saw me. In fact, he gave the slightest nod, as if he'd known all along that I'd return. Damien led the way, but I walked beside him. Not behind. Not anymore. We entered the main hall. The marble echoing beneath our steps. Isabel stood at the top of the staircase. Like a queen awaiting her verdict. She was dressed immaculately, of course. White blouse, navy trousers, no jewelry. Everything about her said power, control, but something in her eyes was off. Not anger. Not surprise. Just deletion. Well, she said, voice neutral. The prodigal pair returns. Damien said nothing. I spoke first. We're not here for drama, Isabel. She tilted her head. That would be a first. I stepped forward. My heart thundered, but I kept my voice steady. We're here to talk, to be honest, to end this. Whatever this is, the surveillance, the games, the silence. I'm carrying a child. Your child. His child. My child. And none of us get to treat this like a transaction anymore. Her lips tightened. Is that what he told you? That I treated this like a business deal? Didn't you? A beat. She descended the stairs slowly, like every step was a speech in itself. Let me explain something to you, Sophie, she said. When you've been abandoned as many times as I have, control isn't a luxury. It's survival. I blinked. Was that ... Vulnerability. She continued. I built this life because I was tired of being the weak one. Tired of being the woman men walked away from. So I made sure they couldn't. I married a man who understood contracts better than emotions. And I thought that would be enough. She looked at Damien. And for the first time, there was hurt in her eyes. But you changed, Damien. You softened. You let your heart get involved. And when it did, it chose her. She turned back to me. Not cruel. Not kind. Just honest. I didn't hate you. I envied you. The room went still. I didn't know what to say. Because how do you respond to someone admitting that your happiness is a mirror to their pain? Damien finally stepped forward. We don't want to fight anymore, Isabel. She looked at him for a long time. You already won, Damien. Don't pretend this is some noble compromise.
He flinched, but then he said, maybe it.
Or maybe it's just the truth catching up to all of us. We sat in the sunroom. The three of us. It was the strangest scene I'd ever been part of. Two people who built a fortress around their lives. Now breaking it apart brick by brick in front of the girl they once hired like a service. But I wasn't just the girl anymore. I was the bridge. And the crack, and the reason everything had to change. The conversation. Took hours. Voices rose, fell, rose again. Tears, hers, mine, even Damien's. Quietly, behind clenched hands, we talked about the future, about co-parenting, about boundaries, about real grief, about letting go of old roles and stepping into uncertain new ones. When the sun began to set, Isabel stood. She didn't say goodbye, just, I'll have my lawyer call yours. And then softly, to me, take care of the baby. And yourself? Then she walked away, this time, without heels clicking like gunshots behind her. Damien, and I didn't speak for a while. We just sat there, as the light faded over the water. Outside. Then he looked at me. Eyes raw. Voice quiet. Are you okay? I nodded. Not because everything was perfect, but because I finally felt like someone who had survived. That night, I walked through the nursery room, the one I hadn't dared to enter before. It was still pristine. Still untouched, but for the first time I could imagine filling it with life. Not because someone this words hung in the air like a suspended breath. It was raining when my water broke. Not the violent kind of storm you see in movies. No thunder. No wind. No panic. Just soft, steady drops on the windows. Like the sky was whispering its approval. Damien rushed from the other side of the house. Barefoot, his shirt half-buttoned, eyes wide with something between panic and awe. It's happening? He gasped. I nodded, breathless and half-laughing. It's happening. We'd practiced this twice, but suddenly none of it mattered. The Ride to the hospital blurred past nurses, white lights. The steady beep of machines. My fingers clutching his dot and then a cry dot small dot strong dot hours dot they placed her in my arms. Wrapped in soft pink and white, her face was wrinkled and red and perfect. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just stared dot because for the first time in my life I felt complete. Not because of Damien. Not because of money dot, because of her. This tiny, breathing miracle that had made every sacrifice worth it. We named her Aria dot. It was my idea, music, movement, something that could be soft or powerful depending on how it's carried dot, like her, like... The hospital stay was short, but meaningful dot. Isabel sent flowers dot, no note, but it was enough dot. We didn't need more. She was finding her own way. And I could respect that now. Maybe one day, Aria would know both sides of her story. The contract.
The chaos.
The love that came anyway. Maybe that was the real gift. Back at the mansion, everything felt different. The staff smiled at me now. Not with polite distance, but real warmth. Charles brought tea to the nursery and remembered how I liked it. Damien held Aria every night before bed like she was spun from gold. Sometimes I caught him watching me, not like I was porcelain, but like I was gravity dot, and I finally let myself believe it. Not the fairy tale dot, the truth. That love doesn't always come wrapped in flowers dot. Sometimes it arrives in silence. In loyalty. In showing up, day after day. We didn't marry right away. We didn't move to the countryside. Or start a foundation. Or appear in magazines. We just lived. Some days were ordinary, some were hard, some were beautiful in a quiet, steady way. I found a small studio off the coast where I painted again, not for escape, but expression. Damien helped launch a wellness center for children born through surrogacy. In Aria's name. And every morning I woke up to a new kind of peace. Not perfect, but real. Josh came to visit one weekend. He held Aria like she was his niece. Teased me for the mansion. Then cried when I showed him the canvas I'd painted of our childhood kitchen. He looked at me and said, "You didn't lose yourself, Soph. You just expanded." I smiled. He was right. Sometimes I think back to the moment I signed the contract. The scared girl. The desperate sister. The silent house. I wish I could reach through time and tell her, "You're not giving up your life. You're finding it." Because I did. In the most unexpected way. And when Aria is old enough to ask how she came into this world, I'll tell her the truth, that it started with a choice, a hard, complicated, imperfect choice, but that it led to love, a different kind of love, one that didn't follow rules. One that didn't arrive on schedule. One that changed everything. Forever.